I'm not coping, I'm losing control, I'm not good enough, all these negative emotions that come into play. So for me, it's really just understanding what they are and then naming those emotions, because that's what helps to reduce the anxiety.
I can remove the emotional connection I have to the situation, and I can think rationally, and I can usually come to a conclusion because I'm not emotionally invested in the outcome.
Really confident leaders actually slow down before they speed up. And I think that's a key piece. I think there's a pressure on leaders that they need to know all, have it all figured out and know everything that's going on. But they don't. They want to be confident, like going into the change. I can tell you, the confidence will build during the change.
You don't need to be fearless. You need to be steady. You need to be consistent. Everyone can lead through change, but it starts with leading yourself.
Welcome to Breaking the Chain, brought to you by Impel Talent. I'm Nathaniel Chapman.
And I'm Terentia Brown.
Welcome back for a third time. I'm so excited. I promise I am excited. I might feel a little stressed. If you're feeling that with me, that's actually part of today's episode, which is kind of fun. But we're here we hope, with you on LinkedIn, and we also hope that we're with you on YouTube. And we are sorry if you have joined a session and rejoined a session. We are learning as we go. This is our first live Breaking the Chain episode, our first live podcast episode. So today we're going to be encountering a very cool topic with a very cool guest and co-host with my Terentia Brown. And today we're talking about leading with confidence through change. This is one of the first episodes of a new series that we hope to run every week, every Tuesday on your lunch break. So if you haven't got anything better to do, or you hate your colleagues and you want to hang out with us, tune in and put some earphones in and get involved. We'd love to have you. But Terentia, welcome onto the live show. Welcome back. And what do you think about today's episode?
Well, I'm excited to share just some tools, some very practical tools that we share with people that we get to coach on a daily basis. Tools that have really helped a lot of people to understand change. I think we fear it a lot, but we don't truly understand what change is and why our brains actually respond in certain ways. And then what we can do, some very simple things, very simple tools that can help us to really just stabilize us in times of uncertainty and change. So I'm excited to share some of these practical tools with everybody.
I mean, we were getting into it again. But I feel like if we don't get this down right, we don't know this topic well. We've given it a couple of quick
Absolutely.
tries. But I was getting really excited. I think we have two topics happening on Impel Connect. So for those of you that don't know, we had a new app that went live a few weeks ago. I think we could probably relate to the stresses around launching that app to today's topic. But we will be launching monthly topics, and we are finishing this month, which is authentic confidence, and we'll be going into navigating through change into next month's topic. So we're going to try and merge those concepts a little bit. So Terentia, kick us off. What exactly are we going to explore today? And how are we going to get started?
Yeah. I think the first thing is to just frame where we all are at the moment. I think there's so many things we have in common. Every leader is currently navigating something, whether it's restructuring a team or in the organization, it's a new strategy, maybe there's shifting expectations, there's, the market pressure. It's something that we've also been experiencing as well. So I really want us to just come in with that mindset and understand that we are all going through some form of change. I think that's the first thing, that we are not alone. We're going through this VUCA world where it's volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And so if we can all walk into this space, really just thinking about that and understanding that we are not alone, I think that gives us a sense of comfort. And then I'd love for us to have a conversation today about understanding what's happening inside of us. Because if we can self-manage and we can improve our self-awareness, we're able to then lead ourselves better and lead the people around us with confidence. Even if we are not feeling super confident to lead through a change because there's so many unknowns, I think it's important that each of us understands why we're feeling unstable. Yeah. And then also understanding as a leader, it doesn't make you weak if you are feeling the pressure of the uncertainty. It just means that you are human. And I think that that's for me. If somebody walks away from this session today, really just understanding that we are all human, we are all trying to navigate change, which happens in our personal life, our professional life, and I think something that I am very passionate about is understanding the why, right? Understanding why we feel this way. So that's what I'm excited to unpack a bit today in the session.
Yeah, me too. And I think we were chatting around like the power of that confidence in tough scenarios before we got started last time. Like, how do you
Yeah.
think we'll get into feeling confident in situations where you aren't very confident, and why that is so impactful to those around you, and the impact of having leaders that have been through those challenges before. So as a result, give off that kind of confidence.
Yeah.
What for you, like what's maybe something that you've utilized um, in those sort of situations where you can bring yourself down and root yourself and be able to deal with high, context or tough situations.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the first thing is just understanding why I'm feeling a certain way, like just understanding what's happening in my brain, what's happening from an emotional perspective, because it is a very biological response. It's also a psychological response. So we need to just be aware. So I think that self awareness for me has really become a muscle that I've built over time to ask myself certain questions of why am I feeling this way? What are some of the thoughts that are coming to our mind? What are some of the negative thoughts? What are some of the positive thoughts? Because our brains also let us down in these situations, I find, because we have these negative automatic thoughts that pop into the brain, where we start telling ourselves, I'm not coping, I'm losing control, I'm not good enough. What are people, people are thinking this about me, all these negative emotions that come into play. So for me, it's really just understanding what they are and then naming those emotions, because that's what helps to reduce the anxiety, that I don't give those emotions control over me. I'm understanding what they are, and then I'm able to then manage them. So I think that's the first one for me, just understanding why my brain's thinking that way, and then naming what I'm feeling so that it loses its power over me.
That's interesting. We were chatting about that. What's the piece you were talking about that this brings you back to some primitive instincts?
Yeah, so it's the amygdala actually, that the part of your brain that that sees change as a threat. And so it basically triggers your fight, flight, and freeze response. And so that's really coming from the very primitive part of our evolution as well, that we need to understand, change comes in different shapes and forms, but our brain still sees it the same. It sees it as a threat. And so what happens is our cortisol level goes up, our adrenaline kicks in, and all of these neurochemicals are also, causing our heart rate to go up, our stress to go up. And so that's the physical response in our body when we are faced with change or uncertainty. Another way that I like to explain it, if you're looking at your computer screen, right? I'm sure many of us have multiple tabs open at the same time. I know I had to close all of them before this live streaming so that it's uninterrupted. But we have these tabs also open in our brain as well, and we have multiple tabs. And especially during a change, our brain is thinking of so many different things. And so it becomes very difficult to just make everyday decisions. It actually feels very heavy. There's a weight that you're carrying just to make everyday decisions when you have all these tabs open. So you have this cognitive load that goes up. And so again, it's important for you to understand that you are not alone and that the people you are leading also have this cognitive load increase. So not just as a leader, but also as people going through these changes.
I think you mentioned something there too before. I just love that when you talk, like when we talk around these things, we realize that these are like primitive instincts or responses to situations that
Yeah.
cause lots of anxiety or stress. And I always think
Mm.
that if you can label these things, and because you were asking me a question, we tried this episode before, but you were saying like, how do you deal in a situation where change is constant and you are, it can be very stressful. And isolating, and how do you have that confidence there? And I was saying I think the biggest thing that people can do is just recognize that these are human feelings that
Yes.
come from a background of survival. I know people use the saying, like, stress came from, like, a jungle and a tiger cat was gonna eat you or you didn't have food, right? And then all of a sudden it's because you didn't send that report on Friday or you missed someone out on an email exchange. And I think it's good to rationalize the fact that these are, yes, you've made mistakes or whatever the issue is, but you can overcome it or you'll move through it. And I think that's where we witness a lot of leaders who you go, wow, that person's extremely confident, but probably because they're realizing actually we can get through this. It's not the end of the world. Let's find a solution.
Yes, and I think one of the biggest things I learned is that, sometimes you may feel that your body is sabotaging you, but it's actually protecting you
Mm.
when you're going through these things because it's trying to protect you from the threat. And so it's helping you just manage that load that you've now put on your brain. And so when leaders are going through change and they're feeling like they're not good enough and they're not doing a great job, it's important for them to realize that it's a biological response, it's a normal response. And so the next step from here is what are you going to do about it? I think for me, what I started researching was what do confident leaders actually then do during the change? Because if you understand what your body's going through, you understand what's happening in your brain, but then how do you translate that into tangible, practical tools? I think that's the key. And that's what I would love for us to just unpack a little bit here so that people understand what are confident leaders doing during a change, and can you copy that? Can you, role model that for your team members? That's something I would love for maybe just to put it to you. What is something that you do? I consider you to be a confident leader, Nate. So what do you do when you are faced with change?
I'm glad you think that. I think that we were just touching on it there, but I think there is for me, and I know I've gone on about different books, but the more I've studied the human condition or more I've understood like that these are are valid emotional responses, you can control it a lot more easier. And so I'm allowed to so okay, I'm going through this change. I'm feeling this way because of X. But now how can I disconnect myself from that and think rationally? I mean, I always think of this in like if this is a weird way to connect it, but let's say like salary negotiation or like when I'm working for it with a client or a candidate and I'm in the middle doing the negotiating, I can remove the emotional connection I have to the situation and I can think rationally and I can usually come to a conclusion because I'm not emotionally invested in the outcome. And one of the things that you can do, I use it in my brain, but I'm like, what's the worst thing that could happen? And you'll be sad to hear that some of the times it might be, all right, we lose out and the company has to go under. And, it sounds awful to think of it that way, but what's the worst thing? All right, I could pick myself back up. And these would be the things that I put in place to make sure I'm comfortable. We're going to lose this project. What does that mean? We have to find another project or find a new client or so I think sometimes role modeling a couple of the worst case scenarios, understanding that I have options even if this doesn't go my way, trying to disconnect the emotional connection to a decision and think about things rationally. There's a character in Dune, it's called I think I'm not going to pronounce it right, and then people who love Dune are going to come after me in the comments, but it's like a mentat, and they were like, it was an ability for human beings to like switch on just a very analytical mindset and, quite a robotic switch if you love fiction. I don't say I'm like that, but I tend to want to try and absorb that idea, which is if I can make a level-headed decision,
Yeah,
then I'm in the best position to move our team forward, the
great.
company forward, whatever. So,
So it's more like calming your mind so that you can think clearly, you have clarity to then make a logical decision, analyze the data that's in front of you, and then potentially take a risk because you don't always have the luxury of having all the data as well. And so I think when the mind is clouded, your risk taking abilities diminish or
yes.
we become more risk averse. So clarity of mind, calming yourself, I think.
Earlier in your career, you don't feel like you have many options, I think. That's probably the root of most stress, is you're like, "This is my one job. I landed this job. Like, I've just been put in a leadership role." Um, and that is inherently part of, development. It's part of going through development and getting, you start gaining experience and you start building career capital, and all of a sudden you feel more comfortable because you do have options. If things don't go your way, or so I do believe that a lot of that comes from that level of stress, and especially sometimes you'll find this with people that have been in the same company for a long period of time. Even if it's for the first 5 or 6 years of their career, they're probably a little bit more adverse to the change than someone that's been through that already, or already made one, company change. I'd say the same for people who've gone through, redundancy. Unfortunately, that's a topic that's been happening a lot more recently. I think when you go through your first redundancy, very stressful. I'm not saying it's never not stressful, but probably very scary, very unknown. But then when you get that next job, or you take your redundancy pay and you can slot into your next opportunity, next time you're hit with redundancy rounds, you'll probably find that you're handling it a lot better than those around you. And I think the main challenges of a leader, when you get more strong, is it's not sometimes from experience breeds confidence, but not all the time do you get the ability to have that experience. So I think a good leader is someone who can encounter a new scenario that they've not encountered before, but has the confidence that they can they can figure it out.
Absolutely. I think a very practical one that we share in our module, our first module actually on self mastery or self leadership, is go slow to go fast. It's a concept that I learned during a leadership program that I was on, and it's really also served me well. And so, really confident leaders actually slow down before they speed up. And I think that's a key piece. And how can you slow down? What does slowing down mean? It means, creating during that period of intense change, a grounding ritual. So that breathing needs to be one of those key aspects that you bring into your day to day. So box breathing, there's different techniques. I use box breathing. So basically, you breathe in. If you imagine a box, you take 4 breaths in, you hold for 4, you release for 4, and then hold for 4 again. And so there's different combinations of box breathing. This again just slows down the heart rate, really just slows you down so that your brain gets oxygen, and then you're able to think more clearly. You could journal, you could write things down. Again, just grounding yourself, what's really just listening to the body, listening to the mind, what's happening around you. So these confident leaders are actually slowing themselves down before they speed up, before they start their day, before they jump into back to back meetings or having really tough conversations. They really just understand that they need to move from a reactive state to a more intentional state. So that's, I would say, one of the things that's helped me.
I realized and I was having a really good call, with someone we hope to have on the podcast very soon, which is really cool, and he was talking about how he likes to make decisions, like, it feels like procrastination at times, I think, to his colleagues, but he likes to stew on decisions, and it really resonated with me because I think you know what I'm like. I love new stuff. I will have new ideas all over the shop. Probably is extremely unsettling, but I don't like to make decisions fast. So, which seems really counterintuitive, but I love new ideas and I like playing around in the sandbox. But then I usually like to take 24 hours, or unless it's something that needs immediate change, I think taking a breather to let ideas marinate suits me really well. Um, and I think I was having this conversation with my partner, actually. She's an executor and she gets stressed out when things don't get finished. So should we, so I can understand how that trait I understand it at home, can infuriate when someone's like, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's park it for 24 hours. Um, so yeah, I think the patience, the labeling of emotion, um, for me, I think understanding that your feelings aren't there to sabotage you. We were saying this in the last session, but they're strengths. They're great ways to, understand that they're protecting you, and I think most leaders who've been through those things judge themselves for don't judge themselves for their responses because they recognize that they're real. And don't judge their team for their responses either. I think you're open to hearing people be uncomfortable and uncertain and making them feel like their feelings are valid.
I think you touching on the topic of vulnerability there, right? Like there's micro I think there's something called micro honesty. So you're sharing in like small bits because if you're not role modeling that behavior to your teams, they're not going to role model it. They're not going to live that out themselves. So it could show up in maybe an example where you are saying, you know what, team, this is also challenging for me, but this is how I'm approaching it. This is what I'm doing in the morning. Maybe I'm doing some breathing techniques. I'm journaling. This is what's really helping me manage the load that's on my mind. And that really just helps the team understand, you know what, my leader is also going through this. It doesn't mean they have everything figured out. They also are figuring it out as I'm figuring it out. So I think that's another key piece. What confident leaders are doing, they're confident enough to say, I actually don't have it all figured out, but these are the things that I'm trying. Yeah. So I think that's a key piece.
I love what you were saying because there is, I think, a role of a leader is to make sure that you know what information is going to people when, and that you can help manage their own emotions, especially through time of change. And this was also coming up in my conversation previously, but I was saying I sometimes I listen in on other people's work. It's probably me and you probably have the same problem. Like people vent about what's happening at work, and my leadership app goes on. I self psychoanalyze people and their teams and the problems within them. But there was a lady in a team, I won't say the company or what, but she was communicating. There was a lot of change happening in the organization, and she was over communicating because you were just saying micro, which I really liked, over communicating what was happening to the team against the direction of senior leadership. And there's already, she thought she was building trust, and people were like, oh, amazing. I'm the one who will let you in. But she was undermining the rest of the leadership team. And it actually caused way more hysterics than it would anything else, you know? So you have to I think the empathy that comes into these situations is understanding, like, I know I have some of this info that I could communicate, but sometimes those decisions are not fully formed or, maybe there are conversations about layoffs that are happening in the team, but they haven't finished yet, or maybe there is team changes. But because you've then communicated that to the team, all you've done is spiked stress, anxiety, or any change that may never come to pass. And you've just impacted productivity across the board, which is like its own self-fulfilling prophecy. You've dragged down production of the team, and then they're surprised when drastic action is taken by the organization.
Absolutely. So for me, when as you were saying that, there were two parts, right? So you have the leader that over communicates, and you have the leader that under communicates as well, where they want to only communicate when they have all the answers and they know when what's happening, all the things. And then that also causes stress to the people because it's even the anxiety and the uncertainty goes through the roof because people are like, what's happening? I don't know what's going on. I'm in the dark. And so I think in that case as well, we need to, as leaders, think about how can we find a happy place, a happy medium in the middle.
It's funny, it feels like a double-edged sword, doesn't it? It's like, don't communicate too much, you're communicating too much. And I think
Yeah.
you're nailing it, that there's an authenticity that comes to, like, I find just making sure people have the enough information that they can feel comfortable, um, but not too much information that's gonna make them, not I would say and it's a word I've always used, which it's like, what's your outcome for people is that they demonstrate the right behaviors and they have the ability to show up for work. So if you're holding on to too much information and that's stressing people out, there's probably a way for you to nurse some of that anxiety to say, hey, there are conversations happening. There's that what is it? There's I can't remember what it's called, but it's where a leader like will paint over something. Like when everything is not going well, they'll be like, "Oh, it's amazing, everything's great," and that also creates distrust because then when everything turns around 180s, it's like we trusted that you had our best interest in mind. So there's almost like a level of being transparent enough, being honest, making sure they're getting an idea of what's happening, that you're working for them in their best interest and you have them at heart, but also being careful about what information they do receive.
Agreed. I think there's a pressure on leaders that they need to know all, like have it all figured out and know everything that's going on. But they don't. They don't need to be the all knowing leader. So, a very simple framework I'd love to just share three things when you're thinking about communicating to your team in these times of change. So, the first thing to tell them, here's what I know, right? Again, we're not wanting to lie. We're not wanting to make up stuff. We're not wanting to, again, you need to really think about what are you communicating when, not to over communicate when, if it's too early, decisions haven't been made yet, and then you need to untell. So here's what I know. The second one, here's what I don't know yet, right? So it may be I'm still waiting because the senior leaders are still making decisions and I don't know yet what that final outcome is. But as soon as I know, and so that it leads me to the third piece, but here's what I'm committed to. I'm committed to as soon as I know what I can communicate, I will. You guys will be the first ones to know once it's clear. And so we don't want to create panic. We don't want to create, a destabilized environment. We actually want to navigate through this change from a place of strength and not from a place of stress. Just those three things have been really helpful to me. I know I went through a whole massive restructuring, reorganization of a big team. And so I just try to keep it simple. I think simplifying things, keeping things simple, keeping the language simple, it just creates a sense of stability, even in the uncertainty, because you cannot erase the uncertainty. You cannot make it go away. We need to start getting comfortable with the uncertainty because that's what's here to stay.
I love that. What a script.
Yeah, I think, and it's a simple one. The other one that I'm really finding something that's helpful, or people only realize it's helpful after they do it, and that's to ask for support early on. So you as a leader, maybe that's, asking a coach for support, asking a peer for support, asking your manager for support. It really just helps you to reflect. It helps you to process. I mean, sometimes I just click, a call to Renisha or I click a call to you just to process what's happening in my brain. And that's what helps me, think about my decision from here or my next step from here. So I'd really say that would be a tool that confident leaders use. They ask for support early because they realize that they need the support to get through it. Phone a friend, I would say, the lifeline. Who's your lifeline? Who's on the other side of that lifeline? Who do you call in during those times?
You don't have to suffer in silence.
Yes, absolutely.
And I know you've touched on these. This is great because I know we were talking about what confident leaders can do through change. I was just thinking of the structure and the ability to simplify and be able to say, like, look, what can I focus on today? What is in my arena of control? One of those things is seeking support. I agree. I'm very happy I have a coach. Greg McManus, if you're watching, thank you. But I feel comfortable being able to have a place where I can vent or be open that has no consequences, which is fantastic. That could be a friend, that can be a coach, it can be all sorts, right? But then in the moment, sometimes big problems can feel overloading because you've got so much you need to figure out at once. And I know you've talked about this before, but simplify, pick one thing to focus on that day or that week. I know you've talked about the 3 Ps, which I want to say is people, priorities, and progress. Did I nail it?
Yes, 100%. Well done.
So wicked. Let's get into, I mean, from your work that you've done so far, we've talked around a lot of like the confidence piece. What are some stories that you can share that you might have seen like from leaders before that have had to go through these sort of transitions?
At Impel Talent, we've worked with thousands of people and teams. And one thing is clear. People don't fail because they lack ambition. They struggle because they don't have a safe, unbiased space to learn, reflect, and grow.
Most people are growing quietly, under pressure, and often alone. And they're asking themselves, how do I lead without losing myself? How do I guide others when I'm still figuring it out? How do I build confidence when everything feels overwhelming?
It's not that they don't care. It's that traditional leadership development isn't connected to real life. Leaders don't need more checklists. They need space to pause, think, and make sense of their experiences. Because when people feel supported and understood, clarity grows, confidence builds, and they show up more grounded and intentional.
That's why we built Impel Connect, a space for real leadership growth, real support, and real human connection. A platform that brings coaching, community, and development into one accessible place. Because growth shouldn't be exclusive. It should be available to anyone ready to invest in themselves.
So what are you waiting for? Join us at app.impeltalent.com. Webinars, workshops, coaching, and most importantly, community.
Impel Connect, genuine human connection in your pocket.
I would say a story that comes to mind is a leader who just became silent during the change because there was so much of fear on what they can communicate, what they can't, because it's a sensitive matter, and they actually were afraid that they would send the wrong message or give the wrong message and make things worse, or things get blown out of proportion. And so this comes back to communication, because I think to confidently navigate change, communication is the main piece here. And if that's not your strength, this is an area I would really encourage you to build intentionally. Really just asking for that support, asking a coach, asking your manager, what can I communicate? Or coming with a plan and really just doing a sense check if you really are crippled by that fear of not communicating, because your team is suffering in silence. Your team is suffering. They may not be even telling you. Their productivity is going down. Their cortisol levels are going up. They actually not producing at the level that you're expecting them to. They are missing things. They are forgetting things because they are so inundated with the stress. They really just feel like they can't cope. And so I would really say that the communication is key, because it has a ripple effect and a massive impact to the people around you. If you completely go silent and you are not communicating anything to them, they're making assumptions. I can tell you, in the absence of information, they're making assumptions, and a lot of times it's probably worse than what it actually is. And so I would say that would have been that's a story that I would always reiterate, because communication is something we can control.
It's funny. Mine's going to be around listening. So that's so weird. We had two topics that are from leaders from different scenarios. But I love what you just said about the human imagination is such a powerful tool, right? Like it's a beautiful thing, but it also drives people crazy. Like the amount of times I've been with team members that make assumptions, let's say on like business development, critical things where they're like, we haven't heard from a client in a week or 2 weeks. And the range of assumptions I've had, like they hate us, they're dropping us off the PSL, they're not interested anymore. I think they've gone with this whole new strategy. And I'll always say, like, that's an amazing assumption. And if you think they're just doing that in one task, that's actually not even in a high stress environment, where it's just us seeking a response and from a lack of communication from a client. What I love to tell people, like, you need to, take that time to help your team members understand and to listen. So you were saying to communicate. I think the other huge thing is to make sure that you can take time to give your team a voice in change. And I think sometimes people get so caught up. One of the things I see when challenges come up with teams, they cut their one-to-ones, they cut um, meetings they feel are unnecessary. And you don't realize just how important that forum is when your team is going through so much as a group, as a collective, but also as the individual. So I encourage in these scenarios, listen, you know, find time, do roundtable discussions, embrace some of these issues together, and certainly make sure that you make time, as much as I know it can be very difficult in periods of massive change, to make sure that the employee still has a voice.
A thought that jumped in as you were talking about, something that I always hear leaders say, especially when they're going through change, or they want to be confident at the start of the change. They want to be confident, like going into the change. And I can tell you, the confidence will build during the change. So, where you are open to learning new skills, being able to communicate, having tough conversations, really grounding yourself, getting clarity of mind, understanding your own emotions. These are all ingredients that grow your confidence as a leader. So, actually, when the next change is coming around the corner for you, I would really encourage you to look at it as an opportunity to grow in the way you communicate, to grow in the way you manage yourself, the way you know, control your emotions, understand your emotional triggers, all of these different aspects of being able to lead, which bring us to, you know, the four core skills of emotional intelligence. You know, seeing change as an opportunity to grow and become confident. And the more change you go through, the more you intentionally grow through each change, the more confident you will become down the line. So that's why when you look at, you know, senior leaders and you're like, how are they not fazed by this massive change? It's because they've grown through all the other changes they've gone through. They didn't just arrive at this point, right, in their careers. They grew through that. So I think that's something I would love to encourage the people watching, is to really just give yourself some grace and compassion, that you're not confident the first time you go through a big change. You get confident every time you go through a change. And if you are intentionally growing through each change.
You know, and I think there's what is it like if you actually changed your perspective on the challenge and you said, well, if once I get through this, I'll be a stronger leader. We got to go through these 10,
Yes.
15, 20, 30 massive shakeups. Probably would think about it a bit different. It's like leveling up in a video game or something. You know, you're going through challenge after challenge and leveling up your ability to be resilient and for you to show up and to learn. We have some really cool practical takeaways that I know T wants to share that you guys can take away this week. I just want to do an awesome call out because we've got 10 people. We've got some people listening to the podcast. I can see some people who are engaging with us. I just wanted to thank Rashid for joining us. You were saying one of the things that he was interested in the podcast was pressure generated overthinking and then sleeplessness and increasingness of cortisol through stress. So I hope you have picked up some great things from today's episode because absolutely agree. And you have talked around a few things that have caused are the outcomes of not addressing that stress with your team. Do you want your team members to have sleepless nights? Do you want their cortisol levels to be risen? Because guess what? It just makes more people make mistakes. And I want to thank some of the other people who are adding and joining in the comment section on LinkedIn. Please continue to listen and get engaged because if you guys have any questions you'd like to ask, we'll leave a couple minutes at the end. Please do put them in the comments section. But T, I'll hand it to you for our practical takeaways for today's episode.
I think it's more just to summarize, because I think we spoke a lot around the first one being communication. So, really just creating a communication line. So, understanding who are you communicating to, what are you communicating, what do you know, what don't you know, and what are you committing to. I think that's the key. Just those three very simple steps when you are communicating. I think the second one we already spoke about early on is just naming the emotion, naming the fear, naming whatever it is that you are worried about. Really just naming it, because it then reduces that emotional charge that you feel. Like, you know, I always say it, you take away the power of that emotion when you name it. So if it's, you know, anger or frustration or just worry or whatever you are feeling, once you name it, you're able to really reduce it. And the third one, really, I would say, is more of a challenge to everybody. And that is to do one hard thing during the change, but do it intentionally. Because when you step out of the comfort zone, this is where growth happens. Because they all, you know, if you think of even the mountain, the growth happens on the climb, not at the summit. Right?
Mm.
It's the challenge is on the climb itself. So what is that one hard thing you would need to do? Maybe it's having a difficult conversation with someone. Maybe it's you know, really just thinking about, how do I communicate a tough message? and thinking about how would this message land. So what is that one hard thing you will intentionally do during the change that's going to help you grow, but also help the people around you grow? Because that's what you will carry with you on the next change.
Yeah, I love that. Doing one hard thing intentionally. I didn't, the confidence doesn't always have to come from knowing everything. It comes from taking aligned action. And I've gotten used to, I think we've both gotten used to dealing in VUCA worlds and challenges, whether it's for our clients and then we're helping shoulder the stress that comes with those environments, and I think we're quite an empathetic team, so we end up absorbing a lot of that stress and pain. Um, but I think for me, it's just making sure you can leave the day or the challenge or the problem a little bit better that day than it was when you came into the day. So if there is a problem that's happening, you can't fix everything. There's lots of stuff that's outside of your control. There are a lot of things in your control. That is managing your own emotions, which we've talked around, labeling issues that are happening, that you can understand it more. And when we label it, there's less fear around it, I think. Um, and then I think there's just making sure you can complete something that moves you closer to your goal. Because when I'm in a very stressful period with work, sometimes when I look at the whole problem, it's overwhelming. And I can be like, I can understand why people will freeze and panic. Um, so I have to be like, all right, let's just knock out the first thing first, and let's get these three things, um, good to go. And that's that aligned action, which then helps improve your mental mindset.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So for our closing piece, I think there were some great talking points here, but one thing to take away with you today is you don't need to be fearless. You need to be steady. You need to be consistent.
Yeah.
The way you can show up and be steady and consistent and show up for your team is by taking some of the practical tools today. Um, Everyone can lead through change, but it starts with leading yourself. Um, I know, too, we talk around this with a lot of the programs. Why do you think that's so important? Why does it start with ourselves first?
Leadership is a tough gig, I always say. And I think the challenge here is that you're always under a microscope. Someone's watching you. People are watching around you how you are carrying yourself because they want to learn from you. They want to copy what you are also doing. So there's a lot of pressure on ourselves to be perfect, but we are not. We are human beings. And so when we are trying to lead other people, I always say to people, you have no business trying to lead anyone else if you can't lead yourself first, because you lose credibility, you lose trust when you tell someone do something and you do the opposite. So as a leader, it starts with you. If you're saying to somebody, you know, do box breathing, ground yourself, manage your emotions, and then you are not doing it, you lose trust, you lose credibility through that change. And so leading yourself means your words and your actions need to align, because that's how trust is built. So yes, you can lead everyone through change, but you've got to first lead the way. You are the captain of the ship. So how are you captaining? How are you steering them?
I love that. And I think the final piece you can leave is invite reflection, community,
Yeah.
Q&A. Look, we wanted to start launching these live series, and we're happy to have some people joining us. Welcome. That's pretty cool. We definitely thought we might be sat here a little lonesome, but we're happy to have some participation and people getting involved, so thank you. This bit is where you learn the most, and I think one of the things we've talked about with the launch of Impel Connect, but also by wanting to drive more of this, why we even launched Breaking the Chain podcast, why we want to do these live sessions, is I think for people to realize you're not alone. These are things that everybody is going through. These are emotions that everybody has, and you can master it. You can manage it. You can reflect on it. The leader that can that can feel out imposter syndrome and have a sense of reflection grows. You grow exponentially. One who can have Q&A and feel open about discussing where they're at is immense. And I would say this to kind of close off the episode. If that's something you're interested to learn more about, we would encourage you to check out Impel Connect. For joining us today, we're happy to offer you guys a free month's access to the app. Just drop us a note to our line, and you can get a free month's access to the app. We'll drop you a code. But we designed it for this reason. We want people to have a space to share and connect and grow and speak to real coaches directly through an application, not AI, because that's how we learn, through genuine human connection.
Absolutely.
So Dee, thank you so much. This has been an incredible live episode. I'm so excited to do more of these. I'm excited for the little podcast studio we've got, little live audience chat, but thank you so much. Anything else you want to add
Thank you.
before we close off?
I think we've given a lot of food for thought. I encourage people to just go back, listen to the replay. I think, take notes and just do one thing out of this, what you've learned today. I think that's already a step in the right direction.
Thank you for sticking with us for 45 minutes. Thank you for those of us that joined the previous session before coming into this session and the previous session. But I've really enjoyed this session. Thank you all for joining us. And we're excited we'll see you again next week, 12 o'clock.
Yes.
We promise we'll be on time this time. You'll be able to watch us on YouTube. You'll be able to watch us on LinkedIn Live. We're hoping to add a few more platforms by then. This episode will also go live on our podcast in a few weeks. So in case you have missed it and you wanted a little bit more of a visual, or you'll get access to it later if you want to share it with your friends or start a fan club, whatever, we don't care. But thank you all for joining us. See you again next week. And continue getting out there, learning and connecting.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us for our latest episode of Breaking the Chain. If you'd like to see more episodes, you can check us out online at www.impeltalent.com/podcast. And if you'd like to perhaps put a question into us or be featured on one of our next episodes, you can email us at info@impeltalent.com. Thank you for tuning in and see you next week.